an original story created exclusively for Love Among Diamonds. Mia Collins stared at the stranger on her doorstep, a tall figure in an impeccable suit holding flowers that probably cost more than her rent. His eyes, deep blue and unnervingly direct, studied her oversized t-shirt, messy bun, and the chaos of moving boxes visible behind her. Rain tapped against the hallway window as she gripped the doorframe, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she looked. "You sent me your address last night," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being listened to. "Wrong number. But I thought you might need these more than flowers." He extended his other hand, revealing a box of expensive chocolates. The absurdity of the situation, her accidental late-night text about needing wine and missing, being loved landing in this man's phone, made her laugh despite herself. Neither of them could possibly know how this mistake would unravel both their carefully constructed worlds. Mia collapsed onto the floor amid a sea of half-opened boxes, her back against the wall. 12 hours of moving, and her new apartment still looked like a storage unit had exploded. Her phone battery showed 7%, just enough to text Jen and beg for reinforcements. New place, 1422, Westbrook Avenue, apartment 5B. Moving day disaster. Bring wine. I already miss having someone who cares if I'm alive. She hit send and dropped her phone onto a cushion, too exhausted to notice the unfamiliar number format in her new phone. Across the city, in a glass-walled office 60 floors above street level, Lucas Reed stared at the message illuminating his screen. He'd been reviewing acquisition reports for hours. The skyline outside, now a constellation of office lights and neon. The text was clearly meant for someone else, but something about it, the raw honesty, perhaps, made him pause. Lucas set down his phone, returning to spreadsheets and projections. Yet the message lingered in his mind like an equation that didn't balance. At 2 a.m., making a decision that defied his data-driven nature, he typed a response. Wrong number, but everyone deserves wine after moving day. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight through Mia's uncurtained windows. She'd fallen asleep on the floor, surrounded by packing materials. The doorbell's shrill ring jolted her awake. She stumbled to the door, conscious of her old college t-shirt and boxer shorts, expecting Jen despite the early hour. Instead, she found herself facing a tall man in a tailored suit, holding a bouquet of cream roses and a box of what appeared to be artisanal chocolates. "Can I help you?" she asked, immediately on guard. "You sent me your address last night," he said, his expression unreadable. "I'm the wrong number." Recognition dawned slowly through her sleep-deprived haze. "Oh God," she groaned. "I'm so sorry. That was meant for my friend." "I gathered," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "I brought these instead of wine. Moving day requires sustenance." Mia stared at him, taking in his carefully styled dark hair, the watch that probably cost more than her car, and eyes that somehow managed to be both sharp and tired. Every instinct told her to close the door, yet something in his demeanor, a certain weariness beneath the polished exterior, made her hesitate. "This is either the beginning of a rom-com or a horror movie," she said finally. He actually laughed at that. "Lucas Reed," he offered, "and I promise I'm not an axe murderer." "That's exactly what an axe murderer would say," she countered, but found herself stepping back. "I'm Mia. I'd invite you in, but as you can see, I'm living in Cardboard City." Lucas stepped inside, surveying the chaos with a quick glance that seemed to catalog everything. "Coffee?" he asked, spotting her unpacked machine on the counter. "The only essential I managed to unpack," she admitted. "I can make some if you'd like to sit somewhere." She gestured vaguely at the box-covered couch. As she fumbled with the coffee maker, Mia became acutely aware of how bizarre this situation was. A stranger, an obviously wealthy stranger, was standing in her disaster zone of an apartment because she'd texted her emotional neediness to the wrong number. "So, Lucas," she called over her shoulder, "do you make a habit of showing up at strangers' doors with flowers?" "First time, actually," he replied, carefully moving a box to sit down. "But your message seemed, I don't know, like you needed someone to show up." The coffee machine gurgled, and Mia turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "That's either sweet or concerning." "Perhaps both," he conceded. She brought over 2 mismatched mugs, nearly tripping over an open box. Lucas reached out instinctively, steadying her arm. The brief contact sent an unexpected current through her skin. "Sorry," she mumbled, handing him a mug that read, "Librarians do it by the book. Occupational humor." "You're a librarian. Bookstore cafe manager." "Close enough." She sat cross-legged on the floor, facing him. "What about you? What kind of job lets you take morning detours to bring flowers to distressed wrong numbers?" Lucas took a sip before answering. "Finance. I make my own schedule." Something about the way he said it suggested there was more to the story. But Mia didn't press. The morning light filtered through dusty windows, casting the strange scene in a dreamlike glow. "I should probably explain the text," she said finally. "Bad breakup. Emergency move. Exhaustion-induced oversharing to what I thought was my best friend's number." Lucas nodded. "No explanation needed. We've all been there." "Well, not exactly there, but..." He gestured at the apartment. "In emotional disarray surrounded by cardboard," she suggested. "Something like that." They fell into conversation with surprising ease. Mia learned he worked long hours, lived alone, and took his coffee black. She told him about her bookstore dreams, her ex who decided she lacked ambition, and her collection of first editions she couldn't afford. As the coffee dwindled, reality reasserted itself. Lucas checked his watch, definitely expensive, and stood. "I should let you get back to unpacking," he said. At the door, an awkward moment stretched between them. "Thank you for the flowers," Mia said, "and for not being an axe murderer." "Thank you for the coffee," he replied. Then, with unexpected hesitation, "Would it be too strange if I brought breakfast tomorrow?" "You probably haven't unpacked your kitchen yet." Mia knew she should say no. This wasn't normal. Yet something about Lucas's presence had made the empty apartment feel less lonely. "Only if you bring decent pastries," she heard herself say. After he left, she stared at the roses on her counter and wondered what exactly she'd just set in motion. The breakfast ritual began innocently enough. Lucas arrived the next morning with a bag of still-warm croissants and coffee from a French bakery Mia had never heard of. They ate perched on boxes, talking about books he claimed to have no time to read, but could discuss with surprising insight. By the third morning, it felt almost normal to hear his knock at precisely 7:15 a.m. By the fifth, Mia had cleared enough space for a small table and chairs. By the 10th, Lucas had a designated mug, plain black, like his coffee, and knew which shelf held the plates. "You never talk about your work," Mia observed one morning, spreading jam on her croissant. She'd noticed how he deflected questions about his job with vague references to meetings and clients. Lucas carefully set down his coffee. "It's not particularly interesting. Finance is numbers, and numbers tell stories," she countered. "The bookstore's ledgers tell me which dreams people are buying, which worlds they're escaping to." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, at her perspective. "My numbers tell less poetic stories. Acquisitions, mergers, risk assessments. So you decide which companies live or die." She meant it lightly, but Lucas's face tightened. "Something like that," he said, checking his watch. "I should go. Board meeting." After he left, Mia wondered about the shadow that had crossed his face. In their morning conversations, she'd shared her life freely. Her childhood in a small town, her literature degree, her struggle to keep the bookstore cafe profitable in the age of online shopping. Yet Lucas remained a careful outline, detailed in his attentiveness, but blank in his personal history. That afternoon at Turning Pages, her bookstore cafe, Mia arranged a display of financial memoirs, suddenly curious about the world Lucas inhabited. The bell above the door chimed as her assistant manager, Zoe, arrived for her shift. "Someone looks thoughtful," Zoe observed, tying her apron. "And those flowers on the counter are new. Secret admirer." Mia smiled. "Wrong number that turned into breakfast. That's either the beginning of a rom-com or a horror movie." "I know," Mia finished. "But he's just, I don't know. It's not romantic. He's probably just lonely." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Men in this city don't bring flowers and breakfast because they're lonely. They download apps." Mia shrugged, unwilling to examine too closely why Lucas kept returning, or why she kept letting him. Across town, in a steel and glass tower, Lucas sat at the head of a conference table, half listening to quarterly projections. His mind drifted to Mia's cluttered apartment, so different from his minimalist penthouse. There was something disarming about her space. Books stacked by color rather than subject. Mismatched furniture, chosen for comfort rather than aesthetic. Coffee mugs with literary puns. Mr. Reed. Your thoughts on the Westbrook acquisition? Lucas refocused. The numbers look promising, but I want a deeper analysis of their market position before we move forward. His assistant, Vanessa, made a note. Also, sir, the background check you requested came in. Lucas felt a twinge of guilt. After their fifth breakfast, he'd asked for a standard background check on Mia Collins. A precaution, he told himself. Though against what he couldn't articulate, the report confirmed what she'd told him. Literature degree, manager of a small bookstore cafe called Turning Pages. Clean credit, despite modest income. No criminal record. Nothing that explained why he found himself looking forward to their mornings, with an intensity that unsettled him. File it, he said curtly, and clear my calendar tomorrow morning. That evening, curiosity led Mia to search Lucas's name online. The results stopped her cold. Lucas Reed, CEO of Meridian Financial Group, one of the city's largest investment firms. Photos showed him at charity galas and economic forums, looking more polished than the man who sat in her mismatched chairs. The article that caught her eye was recent. Reed eyeing Westbrook District for development, her district, where her bookstore stood. The next morning, when Lucas knocked, Mia opened the door with forced casualness. So, she said, taking the bag of pastries, when were you going to mention you're basically a financial superhero, or supervillain, depending on who you ask? Lucas stilled. You looked me up. You left out some relevant details about your finance job. He followed her to the kitchen, tension visible in his shoulders. Would it have made a difference if I'd introduced myself as Lucas Reed, CEO? Maybe, she admitted. People usually lead with that kind of title. That's exactly why I didn't. He accepted his black mug but remained standing. When people know who I am, they either want something or they're intimidated. These breakfasts have been different. Mia studied him, seeing beyond the expensive suit to the tiredness around his eyes. Different how? Real, he said simply. You talk to me like I'm just a person. Do you know how rare that is? The honesty in his voice disarmed her. Fine, but no more half-truths, okay? He nodded, relief visible in the loosening of his jaw. Deal. They settled into their chairs, the tension gradually easing. But as they talked, Mia couldn't shake the knowledge that Lucas's company was eyeing her neighborhood for development, potentially threatening the bookstore. That was her life's work. What she didn't know was that in his briefcase, Lucas carried the background report on her, including details about Turning Pages' financial struggles and her ex-boyfriend's recent inquiries about selling the building. Information he'd requested, but now regretted having, and neither of them knew that across town, that same ex-boyfriend was scrolling through his phone, pausing at a society page photo of Lucas Reed. The caption mentioned the CEO's recent interest in the Westbrook District, where his former girlfriend just happened to run a struggling bookstore. As Lucas left Mia's apartment that morning, the weight of his secrets felt heavier than before. He'd told himself the background check was standard procedure, but the truth was more complicated. For the first time in years, someone had slipped past his carefully constructed barriers, and it terrified him. What terrified him more was the realization that he might lose these mornings, and Mia, when the full truth inevitably came to light. The morning after Mia discovered Lucas's identity, tension lingered between them like a third presence at the table. Their conversation circled carefully around the elephant in the room, his company's interest in her neighborhood. So, Mia finally said, setting down her coffee, are you planning to turn my bookstore into luxury condos? Lucas's expression tightened. Meridian is considering several properties in Westbrook for a mixed-use development. Nothing's been decided. That's a very CEO answer. It's the truth, he countered. Business and whatever this is between us are separate things. Mia raised an eyebrow. Are they? You investigated me, didn't you? The flash of guilt across his face confirmed her suspicion. Standard procedure, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. For breakfast companions. She pushed her chair back slightly. What was in my file? My credit score. The fact that turning pages barely breaks even some months. Mia. Did you know about the bookstore before you started showing up here with croissants? No, he said firmly. The Westbrook project came up after we met. She wanted to believe him. The mornings with Lucas had become a bright spot in her otherwise chaotic life. A strange connection that defied explanation, but felt increasingly necessary. No more investigations, she said finally. If you want to know something, ask me directly. He nodded, relief visible in his shoulders. I can do that. Their fragile truce might have held if not for the call Lucas received that afternoon. The name on his screen made him hesitate. David Collins. Mr. Reed, said the voice on the other end. I understand you've taken an interest in the Westbrook district, and possibly in my ex-girlfriend. Lucas's grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? David Collins. I dated Mia for 3 years. I also happen to own the building where she runs that little bookshop. Lucas kept his voice neutral. What do you want, Mr. Collins? Just to provide some context. Mia's a dreamer, charming but impractical. That bookstore is a financial sinkhole. If you're considering the area for development, don't let personal entanglements cloud your judgment. I appreciate your concern, Lucas said coldly, but Meridian makes decisions based on data, not personal connections. Of course, David replied smoothly. I just thought you should know that I'm considering selling the building. Several developers have expressed interest. After ending the call, Lucas sat motionless at his desk. The rational part of his brain, the CEO part, recognized this as useful information. The part that had spent mornings in Mia's apartment, watching her face animate as she talked about books, felt physically ill. He should tell her about the call, but explaining would mean admitting that her ex had somehow connected them, which raised questions about how visible their relationship had become. The decision was made for him the next morning when he arrived at Mia's apartment to find her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, holding a printed email. Care to explain this? She asked, her voice unnervingly calm. Lucas took the paper. It was an internal Meridian memo about the Westbrook development, with turning pages highlighted as a potential acquisition target. The sender's name had been redacted. Where did you get this? He asked, mind racing through possibilities. Does it matter? You've been planning to buy out my bookstore while sitting at my table every morning. That's not. Did you talk to David too? Is that part of your due diligence? The accuracy of her guess stunned him into silence, which she correctly interpreted as confirmation. Get out, she said quietly. Mia, please. It's not what you think. It never is with men like you. Her voice cracked slightly. I trusted you. I actually thought. She shook her head. Just go. Lucas stood on her doorstep long after she closed the door, rain beginning to fall around him. He'd built his career on calculating risk and return, on protecting himself from vulnerability. Now, for the first time, he'd miscalculated badly on something that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. That evening, his phone lit up with a message from his stepmother. Dinner tomorrow. Not a request. The Montgomery girl will be joining us. Lucas stared at the text, feeling the walls of his carefully constructed life closing in. His stepmother. Eleanor had been trying to match him with socially appropriate women since his father's death 5 years ago. The timing couldn't be worse. He typed back a refusal, then deleted it. Perhaps distance from Mia would provide clarity, and he owed Eleanor some semblance of family obligation. I'll be there, he responded, the next morning. For the first time in weeks, Lucas didn't bring breakfast to Mia's apartment. The absence felt like a physical ache as he sat through meetings, unable to focus on acquisition projections or market analyses. By afternoon, he'd made a decision. He drove to Turning Pages, parking his Aston Martin across the street. Through the window, he could see Mia arranging books, her expression distant. The sight of her, hair pulled back, concentrate frown as she worked, made something twist in his chest. Before he could enter, his phone rang. David Collins again. I've had a better offer for the building, David said without preamble. But I thought I'd give Meridian right of first refusal, given your personal interest. Lucas ended the call without responding, his decision crystallizing. He would attend his stepmother's dinner, endure the Montgomery girls' company, and then he would fix this, though how, exactly, he wasn't sure. What he did know was that for the first time in his adult life, balance sheets and risk assessments weren't providing the answers he needed. Eleanor Reed's dining room was a study in calculated elegance. Crystal that caught the light just so, flower arrangements that whispered of taste rather than shouting it, and place settings that could make royalty feel scrutinized. Lucas straightened his already perfect tie as the maid showed him in. "Darling, finally." Eleanor rose to kiss the air beside his cheek. At 60, she remained striking. His father's second wife, only 15 years Lucas's senior. "You remember Catherine Montgomery?" The blonde woman beside his stepmother extended a manicured hand. "Lucas, it's been ages." He managed the expected pleasantries while his mind remained fixed on Mia's face when she told him to leave. 2 days without their morning ritual felt like withdrawal. "Lucas has been distracted lately," Eleanor remarked as they took their seats. "Some project in that dreary Westbrook area." "Actually," he said, "I've been reconsidering our position on Westbrook." Eleanor's smile remained fixed, but her eyes sharpened. "Oh, you seemed quite enthusiastic about the projections last month. The area has more cultural value than we initially assessed." Catherine leaned forward with practiced interest. "I adore little neighborhood spots. They have such character." The way she said character, like one might describe an eccentric but embarrassing relative, made Lucas think of Mia's bookstore, with its mismatched chairs and handwritten shelf labels. "There's a bookstore cafe there," he said, turning pages. "The owner has created something special." Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "A bookstore. Lucas, darling, Amazon exists. It's more than that," he found himself saying. "It's a community space. People connect there." "How lovely," Catherine murmured. "Though I imagine the economics are challenging." "Not everything valuable can be quantified," Lucas replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Eleanor set down her wine glass with deliberate care. "Lucas, may I speak to you privately for a moment?" "Catherine, would you excuse us?" In his father's former study, Eleanor closed the door and turned to him. "What's going on? First you miss board meetings. Now you're waxing poetic about a failing bookstore." "It's not failing. It's just, don't insult my intelligence." Eleanor's perfectly composed facade slipped. "I've heard rumors. A woman in Westbrook." "Really, Lucas? Your father built Meridian on sound judgment, not sentimentality." Lucas felt a familiar pressure, the weight of the Reed legacy, his father's expectations, the company's reputation. "My personal life is separate from business decisions." "Nothing is separate when you carry our name." Eleanor's voice softened strategically. "Darling, everyone has diversions. But Catherine comes from the right background. She understands our world." The implication was clear. Mia could not belong in his sphere, as if summoned by his thoughts. His phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line froze him. "Turning Page's background report." Eleanor noticed his expression. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said too quickly. But as they returned to dinner, the knowledge of that unread email burned in his pocket. His team was still investigating Mia, despite his order to stop. The violation felt personal, in a way business decisions rarely did. Across town, rain pelted the windows of Turning Pages as Mia closed for the night. The store had been unusually quiet, or perhaps her mood had colored her perception. 2 days without Lucas's morning visits shouldn't affect her this much. Yet the absence felt significant. Her phone chimed with a notification. An email forwarded from an anonymous address. The subject line, Collins Property Acquisition, made her stomach tighten. She opened it to find a conversation between Lucas and his acquisition team, discussing the building that housed her bookstore. "Proceed with caution given CEO's personal connection to current tenant." One line read, "Background check reveals financial vulnerability. Leverage point. Lease renewal coming up." Mia sat heavily on one of her reading nooks, rain drumming a counterpoint to her racing heart. The timestamps showed the emails were recent, after Lucas had promised no more investigations. Her phone rang, Zoe checking on her. "You okay? You seemed off today." "I'm fine, Mia leet. Just tired." "Is it that guy?" The wrong number. Mia laughed bitterly. Turns out he was the wrong guy, period. After hanging up, she stared at the rain-streaked windows, reflecting on how quickly she'd let Lucas into her life. Her space, her mornings, her thoughts. How easily she'd believed he saw her as something more than a business obstacle. Back at Eleanor's house, dinner had devolved into thinly veiled interrogation. Catherine asked about Lucas's philanthropic interests, while Eleanor steered the conversation toward mutual acquaintances, whose daughters were doing such interesting things now. Between courses, Lucas excused himself to check the email that had been haunting him. The updated report included details about Mia's lease, her student loan payments, and most disturbingly, notes from an interview with her ex-boyfriend David, who characterized her as financially naive and emotionally unpredictable. The invasion of privacy made him physically ill. This was his company, operating under his name, treating Mia like a target rather than a person. Worse, she would never believe he hadn't authorized it. When he returned to the table, Eleanor was describing their summer plans in the Hamptons, neatly including Catherine in the narrative. Actually, Lucas interrupted. I won't be joining you this summer. Eleanor's smile flickered. Don't be ridiculous, darling. You always come. Not this year. He stood, placing his napkin beside his barely touched dessert. I need to be somewhere else. Lucas, Eleanor's voice sharpened. We have guests. I apologize, Catherine, he said formally. Family emergency. He drove through the rain-slicked streets toward Westbrook, toward Mia, uncertain what he would say, but knowing he needed to try. But as he approached Turning Pages, he saw Mia exiting, locking the door behind her. Even from a distance, her posture spoke of exhaustion. Lucas parked and got out, rain immediately soaking through his expensive suit. She turned, spotted him, and her expression hardened. Did you need more information for your report? My credit score, perhaps? Or maybe you'd like to know if I cry when I'm alone. I can explain. Don't bother. She held up her phone, displaying the forwarded email. Your team is very thorough. Congratulations. I didn't authorize that, I swear. It doesn't matter. Rain plastered her hair to her face, but she made no move to seek shelter. You know what hurts most? I actually believed our breakfasts meant something, that you saw me, really saw me. I did. I do. No, she said quietly. You saw a problem to solve, a risk to assess. She walked away then, straight back despite the rain, leaving Lucas standing alone outside the bookstore. That had come to mean so much more than a property acquisition. 3 days passed in a blur of meetings and unanswered texts. Lucas moved through his glass-walled office like a ghost, present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. The Westbrook development remained on the agenda, but he'd ordered all action paused, a decision that raised eyebrows around the boardroom table. We're losing momentum, his development director warned. The Collins property is key to the whole project. I'm aware, Lucas replied, staring out at the rain that had been falling relentlessly since that night outside Turning Pages. Vanessa appeared in his doorway, expression carefully neutral. Sir, there's something you should see. She handed him her tablet, open to a local business blog. The headline made his stomach drop. Turning Pages bookstore faces closure as building sale looms. The article quoted sources close to the property owner, saying the building would soon be sold to developers. It mentioned Meridian Financial as a potential buyer, alongside a photo of Lucas leaving Mia's apartment building weeks earlier. How did they get this? He demanded. The photo's been circulating on social media, Vanessa said carefully. Someone recognized you. Lucas scrolled through the comments beneath the article, his chest tightening at the narrative forming. Heartless CEO seduces local bookstore owner while plotting to destroy her business. Get me everything on David Collins, he said, and cancel my meetings for the rest of the day. Rain pounded against the windows of Turning Pages as Mia tried to focus on inventory. Since the article had appeared that morning, the store had been unusually busy, a mix of regular customers offering support and curious newcomers drawn by the drama. Your coffee's getting cold, Zoe said, setting a fresh cup beside her. Thanks. Mia rubbed her temples. Any more reporters? Just that blogger who keeps ordering single espressos and trying to look inconspicuous. Mia glanced toward the window seat, where a young woman with an open laptop was indeed watching them over the rim of a tiny cup. "Perfect," she muttered. "Just what this day needed." The bell above the door chimed, and both women turned. Mia's heart stuttered as Lucas stepped inside, rain dripping from his hair and expensive coat. The cafe section fell silent as customers recognized the man from the article's photo. "Mia," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "I need to speak with you." She was acutely aware of the audience, the blogger now openly recording with her phone. Regular customers exchanging glances, Zoe hovering protectively nearby. "This isn't a good time," she said, keeping her voice steady. "It has to be now." He crossed the space between them. Heedless of the water, he was tracking across her carefully polished floors. "David Collins is selling the building to Landmark Development, not to Meridian. He used our connection to drive up the price." Mia blinked, processing this. "How do you know?" "Because I just spoke to him." He admitted it. Lucas ran a hand through his wet hair. "He's been playing both sides, leaking information to the press, sending you those emails." Around them, customers had abandoned any pretense of not listening. The blogger was typing frantically. "Why would he do that?" Mia asked, though part of her already knew. "Because I rejected his offer to sell to Meridian." Lucas's voice dropped. "And because he knew it would hurt you, hurt us." The us hung in the air between them, a declaration neither had voiced before. "There is no us," Mia said quietly. "You investigated me. You treated me like a business risk." "Yes," Lucas admitted, and the honesty in his voice silenced the room. "I did. Because that's what I know how to do. I assess risks, I gather data, I protect myself." He stepped closer. "But none of it worked with you. The more information I collected, the less I understood why I couldn't stay away." Mia was aware of phones recording now, of this intensely private moment becoming public spectacle. Yet somehow, with Lucas standing before her, expensive suit ruined, corporate mask completely dropped, none of it seemed to matter. "I made a mistake," he continued. "I let my team treat you like a target instead of telling you the truth. That I was terrified of what I was feeling. That for the first time in my life, spreadsheets and background checks couldn't protect me from caring about someone." A customer whispered something to their companion. Zoe had stopped pretending to wipe tables and was openly watching. "You should have trusted me," Mia said, her voice stronger now. "You should have asked me directly about the bookstore, about David, about my finances." "You're right," Lucas nodded, water dripping from his chin. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for a chance to do better, to be better." The bell chimed again as more customers entered, drawn by the growing commotion. Someone whispered, "That's the CEO from the article." Mia felt the weight of all these eyes, all these expectations. The narrative was writing itself around them. Would she forgive the wealthy businessman who deceived her? Would this be a fairy tale or a cautionary story? "I can't do this here," she said finally, "not with everyone watching." Lucas looked around, seeming to fully register their audience for the first time. His face, normally so composed, flushed slightly. "You're right," he said. Again, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. "This is yours. Whatever happens between us." Mia took it, confused. "What is this?" "The deed to this building," he said simply. "I bought it this morning. It's in your name now." Gasps rippled through the cafe. The blogger's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I don't understand," Mia said, staring at the key. "It's not a bribe," Lucas clarified quickly. "It's insurance. Whatever you decide about us, Turning Pages is safe." The gesture was simultaneously grand and intimate. Exactly the kind of sweeping romantic move that belonged in the books on her shelves. Yet in his eyes she saw not calculation, but genuine fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of his own vulnerability. "We should talk," she said finally. "Not here." Relief washed over his features. "Where?" Mia glanced at the still recording phones, the watching eyes, somewhere without an audience. She turned to Zoe. "Can you close up?" Her assistant nodded, eyes wide. "Go. I've got this." As they walked toward the door together, not touching but aligned, whispers followed them. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist. Lucas's driver waited at the curb, but Mia shook her head. "Let's walk," she said. "I think we both need the air." They moved away from Turning Pages. away from the cameras and expectations. Two figures finding their way through the rain-washed streets, not yet reconciled, but taking the first step together. 6 months later, Turning Pages had transformed. The original space remained, with its worn wooden floors and cozy reading nooks, but it now extended into the adjacent storefront. The new section featured floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a small stage for readings, and an expanded cafe area where the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the familiar smell of books. Mia stood behind the counter, watching Lucas arrange chairs for the evening's author event. He'd discarded his suit jacket, his crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves as he worked. The sight still gave her a peculiar thrill. This powerful man who now spent his Saturdays helping customers find obscure poetry collections. "Is this straight?" he asked, gesturing to the banner announcing their featured writer. "Perfectly corporate," she teased. "I'll mess it up a bit later so it looks more authentic." He smiled, the easy, unguarded expression that had become more frequent over the months. Their path back to each other hadn't been smooth or simple. That rainy walk 6 months ago had led to hours of painful honesty about his fear of vulnerability, her fear of being valued only for utility, the walls they'd both built after past wounds. "Your 3 o'clock is here," Zoe announced, appearing from the storeroom. "Shall I send her to your office?" Mia glanced at Lucas, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes, thanks." Eleanor Reed looked out of place among the eclectic furnishings of Mia's small office, her Chanel suit and pearls at odds with the vintage desk and wall of literary quotes. This was her 3rd visit, each slightly less strained than the last. "The expansion looks lovely," Eleanor said, accepting the offered seat. "Very inviting." "Thank you," Mia replied. "We've increased foot traffic by 30% since the renovation." She'd learned that speaking Eleanor's language, numbers, results, strategy, created neutral ground between them. "Lucas mentioned you're publishing something." Eleanor's tone suggested she found this surprising, but was trying not to show it. "A collection of essays," Mia confirmed, "about community spaces in the digital age. Turning Pages is the centerpiece." What she didn't add was that the collection included the story of a misdirected text message that had changed her life, how a wrong number had somehow been exactly right. "He seems settled," Eleanor said carefully. "Different." Mia recognized the olive branch for what it was. He's still the same Lucas, just with more balance now. After Eleanor left, Mia found Lucas in the poetry section, helping a teenage girl find Rupi Kaur. The sight of him, focused intently on a customer's needs, no trace of the corporate mask he once wore constantly, filled her with quiet certainty. Their relationship had evolved in the public eye. Thanks to that dramatic confrontation in the cafe and the viral video that followed. For weeks, they'd been fodder for local blogs, the CEO and the bookstore owner, a modern fairy tale, or a calculated PR move, depending on who was writing the story. Lucas had led board meetings where his judgment was questioned, while Mia endured skeptical looks from customers who wondered if she'd sold out. They'd faced it together, establishing boundaries that protected their private world while acknowledging the public interest in their story. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, finding her lost in thought by the register. "The day you showed up here in the rain," she admitted, "when everyone was watching." He winced slightly. "Not my most dignified moment. It was exactly what I needed," she said. "You completely stripped of corporate armor, willing to be vulnerable in front of strangers." "I was terrified," he confessed, "not of the people recording, but of losing you." The bell chimed as a customer entered, interrupting their moment. Lucas squeezed her hand briefly before returning to his task, and Mia marveled at how natural their partnership had become, in the store and beyond. That evening, after the author reading, they closed Turning Pages together. Lucas counted the register, while Mia arranged books for the morning display. Rain tapped gently against the windows, echoing that first night he'd appeared on her doorstep with flowers. "I finished reading your essay collection," he said, looking up from the cash drawer. "It's beautiful, Mia. Especially the piece about the wrong number." She smiled, arranging a stack of new releases. "I'm still not convinced it was wrong. Statistically improbable, maybe, but not wrong. The CEO in me would argue that's irrational," he said. moving to help her with the display. But I've learned to appreciate irrationality. It led me to you. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the awning, through the window. They could see people hurrying past. Collars turned up against the weather. Inside, warmth and the scent of books created a sanctuary. Did you ever imagine this? Mia asked, gesturing around them. When you first got my text? Lucas considered the question. No, he said honestly. I couldn't have imagined any of this. My life was spreadsheets and acquisitions. I understood risk assessment. He gestured between them. Not this. And now? Now I understand that some things can't be quantified. He moved closer, his hand finding hers among the books. That sometimes the best decisions are the ones that terrify your board of directors. Mia laughed, leaning into him slightly. My business model still terrifies your financial advisors. Because they can't put a value on what happens here, Lucas said, looking around at the space they'd built together. They see overhead and inventory. They don't see the high school kid who found their first LGBTQ romance novel here last week, or the elderly gentleman who comes for poetry readings because his apartment is too quiet. Mia turned to face him fully, struck by how far they'd both come. He from his glass tower, she from her defensive solitude. Ready to go home, she asked. Lucas nodded, helping her into her coat. As they moved toward the door, he paused to look back at their creation, this improbable blend of their worlds. You know, he said, I still have that first text you sent. I saved it. Mia raised an eyebrow. The one about needing wine and missing being loved. Yes, he smiled. A private expression meant only for her. It turns out, it wasn't a wrong number after all. Just a detour to the right destination. Outside, the rain had softened again. They lowered the security gate together, their hands meeting on the lock. A CEO who had learned to value more than balance sheets, and a bookstore owner who had found love in the most unlikely message.